Well, last October we did change our diesel car for an all-electric one. And why did we do it, and what's it been like? Essentially, we followed the track recommended by Mike Berners-Lee. When you're coming to change a car, think electric. And that's where we were. We'd come that after 5 years of that particular car. And our gradual change of lifestyle meant we could drop down a car size, and that made it easier to find a solution that was viable for us. But how is it panning out with the car? It's a pleasure to drive and very quiet, so we can have conversation easily. Response in the car is instant, which is great for pulling away on roundabouts or joining motorways. And the heat pump aided ventilation and heating system rapidly clears the windscreen on cold mornings and gives a comfortable environment. And we've had Peugeot cars for many moons, and the conversion from a diesel version to an E1 was helped by our familiarity with the controls of cars of the same stable. Presently, it attracts a zero road fund tax rate. The service costs are much lower, as the energy conversion and traction is so much simpler, and this goes some way to offset the additional upfront costs. Now, the installation of the charging point was straightforward for us. We chose a middle-of-the-range option of a 7 kilowatt supply, which cost about £1,000, including a locking system. Our electricity supply was already conveniently sited next to a parking space. That's very fortunate, and the wait time was just a couple of weeks. In fact, it arrived before the car. And our car is a so-called Type 2 connector, and using the standard cable, the larger end piece fits into the car and the smaller into the charging point. Recharging can be time delayed, and so it is okay to plug the car to the charging point in the evening and defer the charging until our Economy 7 lower electricity rate in the night. That does mean the fuel costs per mile are cheaper than comparative internal combustion engine cars. But it does need a bit of forethought. Journeys do need more planning. It's fair to say that we were a bit apprehensive for our first longer trip. That was from Hampshire to Somerset, and that return journey was longer than our single charge range. And we weren't going to have a power point available on the site for the overnight recharge, so we would need to find a faster charging point, as for a 22 kilowatt unit or higher. The higher power outlets require removal of a blanking plate on the filling point of the car, and then you can accept the supply cables from fast charging points. And rather naively, we imagined that all charging points were the same and equally available. There are different types of connections, and in a sense it's a bit like having different grades of petrol and diesel versus petrol as a choice. But most filling stations have most fuel types, but not all locations have all the connectors, power points and paying systems that you want. The car's sat-nav signals where there are charging points, but it is easier to plan and search using a phone or tablet app such as ZapMap. You can pick out the connections that you want and the payment method and filter out those that definitely won't work for you. And if we were travelling and just want a short stay, we might look for a fast charger, pink rather than blue on this map, and see if there is one of our type. And if it's thought to be working, and it probably is available, we would want a fast charging Type 2 DC direct current system. Charging points are mostly located in towns, and there are gaps. So travelling for a couple of hours or so and having a break is viable for many, many journeys, and we're getting used to it in a relatively emission-free way. And we're pleased that our CO2 emissions from tank to wheel would drop from 219 grams per mile going by the WITCH tabulation to 0. And also we would not be adding to the emissions of nitrogen oxides and carbon particulates from the exhaust pipe tail into the air that we breathe. It's good too that the energy delivered to the rotating wheels is about 3 times more efficient than that delivered by an ICE, internal combustion engine. After all, you don't need to heat up a large chunk of metal to propel a car if you don't have to. In the which approach, the well-to-wheel emissions are those required for extraction of the energy from its source, its conversion into the fuel in the car, and the miles provided by that fuel. For our former car, the tank-to-wheel emissions of 219 grams per mile transformed to 264 grams per mile for well-to-wheel. That's more than a kilogram for the short round trip to town, and more than a quarter of a tonne of CO2 equivalents for 1,000 miles. What the emission savings are from well to wheel depends a lot upon the electricity generation. It would be nice to think that a couple of solar panels, these here are rated at 200 watts, could be an off-grid source. These are appropriate to charge a 1 kilowatt battery, and that works just fine for my e-bike. Its battery houses 180 watt hours, and as a result, the electric vehicle can be run off-grid from the solar panels via a portable power station or a custom battery and inverter. However, with a car battery rated at 50 kilowatt hours, this isn't viable, and instead we have a main source with the 7 kilowatt supply, and charging can take place off-peak. Charging and discharging of a lithium-based battery, that's lithium-ion or lithium-ion phosphate, appear to be highly efficient, and at the outside, then a deep recharge of around 80% would require about 45 kilowatts of juice. Transmission and distribution losses from the source are of the order of 10% also, and this recharge might require in total 50 kilowatts at source. The headline figure for the carbon intensity of our electricity, as for example for this morning, was about 140 grams per kilowatt hour. But that varies from region to region depending on the source type used in that region. In the northwest of Scotland, wind and water predominate, and the associated emissions can well be near zero. Other regions like the Midlands and the south of England are considerably higher than the normal average. Our electricity supplier, Ecotricity, is a renewable specialist and innovator, so we can reasonably claim that our carbon footprint for the travel miles is near zero, and we can enjoy that during the driving and also in the charging stops.